Thank you, everybody. That was indeed a very relatable talk, as you'll see in the upcoming slides. Well, Mark and me will take you along our journey of platform engineering over the last somewhat 3 years that we started at DHL eCommerce. We went over this one, Mark and Roel from eCommerce Netherlands. And if we say eCommerce, DHL eCommerce Netherlands, where we actually go back quite a while. We started in 1769 as Vergent en Loos, for the Dutch people that may be a familiar name. And through a series of companies, DHL, Select Vracht, and the merging, we started out as DHL eCommerce Benelux. And we're, again, for the people in the Netherlands, we're the vans in the street. The yellow vans that you see riding, that's all us. The majority of the trucks that you see on the highway, that's also for the majority us. And we have a large, we have a fine-grained network over the Netherlands and Belgium, where we can scale up, scale down, and be resilient to all kinds of events that happen. And interesting from a software perspective is the majority of the software that we use, we build ourselves in-house. So we have about 35 development teams who are working on stuff you know and stuff you don't know. Stuff like track and trace, you want to know where your package is, but also routing trucks on the parking lot, and also managing the tracks on which the packages are sorted and everything. So, and the interesting thing about our domain is we have a high traffic platform because everybody wants to know where their package is, of course, right? But the limiting factor for us is the physical domain. So there's one thing, when something goes wrong, it's one thing that a Kafka queue is growing and growing and growing and growing, right? But for us, those are real packages in a real warehouse. Right, so for your Kafka queue, you can scale horizontally and just plow through an entire queue. That's all fine, but for us, those are trucks and people that have to carry packages, etc. So the acceptance for downtime is very low at DHL, and things start to become complicated quite fast. So that tells a little bit about the technical platform that we're running on. And talking about platform, we want to take you on that journey. About, I don't know, 5 years ago, we started out with a very small team, and these were 10, 12, 15 people. Who started out as an independent business unit within the big DHL corporation, who started to make their own stuff for their own domain. And this was real startup culture. So as much as possible, shift left, make sure that all of the functionals, non-functionals, etc., were being handled by this team. And we were quite successful, so we were growing. And in this shift left mentality, we quickly ran into what Suzal Daniels called, as he used to work with us. We had a sort of shift left until there's only shit left. That's definitely where we were about 4 years ago. And the natural tendency of the company was to centralize control again. So what we did was this one team that grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Everybody had admin rights, etc. You know, we started to create our cloud infra team. And this cloud infra team, they were the judge, jury, and executioner of everything we did in cloud. And well, I think there are quite a few team topology fans in the audience. You kind of see where this is going, right? Death by tickets, right? So flow, there was no flow anymore. So everybody was mad, everybody was frustrated. We had a big pile of tickets, and it was hard. And it hurt, in fact. And now we're talking about 3-ish years ago that this started. It was already on the slide in the big screen, right? The Puppet report, and this is free from the Puppet report, where they say, okay, in addition to shift left, also shift down. Make an internal developer platform, and the internal developer platform is often described as a collection of technologies, tools, and knowledge organized and implemented. Yeah, okay, terrific. However, that although true, that quote, it's very technocratic, right? It deals with knowledge, it deals with technology, it deals with stuff like that. And the gist is that platform change is organizational change. And the technical stuff is but a small part of the entire transition, right? And in this view, you might have like a third of technology, but then people and process, that's where the complexity lies. That's where it gets difficult. And we have a series of learnings in this area that Mark will take you through.
Thank you. Yeah, so when we were thinking about the story that we had, because there's so much to tell, so little time to tell, we really thought about, okay, how can we summarize it into a few growth paths? Because the change that we're going through is not something that we do once. It's not something you can apply and move on to something else. It's something that we continuously need to adapt, as Paula also mentioned. You're continuously changing, learning, adopting, and that's basically where we came to 3 different growth paths. And I think the first one for us, if you know the quote from Reid Hoffman, at some point every startup needs to evolve from pirates to navy, and that is what we went through. We needed to professionalize, we needed to do things differently, yet we wanted to maintain that speed that we once had, and that once enabled us to grow as big as we have grown in the Netherlands. So if you think about the lessons learned there, the first thing we really had to change was the way that we deal with ownership. So Roel already mentioned that at a certain point, we went from free-for-all to centralized infrastructure. People were basically going through a centralized team for every single thing. Obviously, that doesn't scale. And the time that we started doing this about 3 years ago, we were already at 20 teams. So the fact that we had 6 people trying to build 50 different technology products, yet cater to 20 teams that want A to Z, that just didn't scale anymore. And a big part there is changing ownership. So who's responsible for a choice? Who's responsible for a decision? How does a certain process work? All those type of things were things that we needed to shift. But by shifting that, you go to the second problem, and that's fear. I think it was mentioned a few times already today, but there's different biases that you need to work with. And we definitely had to work with a team that felt responsible for a lot of things that they shouldn't be responsible for, but nobody else was taking that responsibility. So again, it's tightly coupled to the fact that we need to change ownership, but by talking about the fact that we want to go to self-service, we want teams to be autonomous in creating a database. Okay, but how do we deal with the fact if someone creates a 20,000 euro database? Things like that popped up, and it's the process side, the people side, that's actually the difficult part. It's not making a Postgres database self-service, which is hard. So it's about shifting control from a central team to a different way of working, different workflows, different processes. One thing that we're using there is to create trust through different areas. So think about guardrails. There are things we can do with automation that can give us some sort of certainty. We can think about the actual workflow and who's responsible for which part of that workflow. But on top of that, there are also things you can think of in terms of scorecards, so making it visible to teams what we actually expect from them, instead of having an army of risk officers go towards them. One really big one for us is the fact that we also needed to get clarity on demand. Because everybody's saying for the coming day that we need to build a product, basically. We need to platform as a product. But product also means that you have control over what you're building and that you're not just building everything that anyone wants you to build. So for us, coming from a place where our platform was mandated, there was no other way around it, we still wanted to find a way to go towards, we want people to actually use it instead of complain about it. However, how much effort and time can you actually put into a product if everything keeps coming at you without you knowing it. If a team all of a sudden comes up with a new demand or a new type of architecture that wasn't aligned at all. This change, I think it actually took us up until 25 to about 30 teams before this pain was relevant enough, pain was visible enough that we needed to change the way that we're operating also in this way. Basically moving more towards things like portfolio management, moving more towards a proper ticketing system instead of just an open Slack channel, or even worse, directly PMing engineers that they need to do something for you. The other one is, it's all about the foundational layers. Basically, you can't build on quicksand. And why is that important? We definitely hit the wrong abstraction levels at first. So when I came in 3 years ago, I noticed a few things to which a developer portal seemed like a right fit. However, I wish I knew the quote from Aaron Erickson at that time, which has become quite popular nowadays, which basically says, starting to build your platform at the front door, from the front end seems like building your house with the front door. And that's literally what happened. We saw that the developer portal was successful in some areas. It really helped show ownership, which is something we didn't have. We didn't know who was responsible for which systems, which team was responsible for certain components or databases. On the other hand, we lacked proper documentation. So some things worked well. Did it actually become the tool that people used on a day-to-day basis? No. Is it today? No, still not. But yet again, it is a central part for some of the things that we are trying to move towards. And one of those things is actually our single source of truth, as we like to call it. So in essence, which teams do we have, which systems do we have, and in which domain do they reside, and who is the owner? We had to have that for infrastructure as code. So the first abstraction level we tried to move towards was giving infrastructure as code to teams. And that doesn't mean for us that we want to let them write Terraform, because Terraform is, again, an abstraction level, is, again, something they need to learn. And we don't want 30 teams to learn Terraform, because there's no sense doing that. So we were looking for an abstraction on top of Terraform, which for us right now is a very simple YAML format, to basically take the first step. Because we could go immediately to a developer portal, but what are you going to self-service if you don't have the workflow, if you don't have the underlying automation, and all the other things in place yet? But if you want to do self-service on top of Git with YAML files, you still need to know who is responsible for something, who is the owner, which systems do we have, because otherwise there's just no point automating anything. So we there saw that we needed some really fundamental things which have been around a long time again. Everybody's accustomed to CMDBs. Everybody hates them. Yet we do need some sort of CMDB to be able to do this properly. And in there, we need to figure out how can we show teams that there's value in defining their team or their resources in order to use the platform and be more sufficient. Another one, which was an interesting one, was that we had a DevOps team quite quickly. So when I came in, one of the things I looked for was a way to measure what's going on in the organization. At that time, 80 people, 20 teams-ish. We started using a platform which Roel will go into a little bit later. But on the other hand, I also founded a DevOps team which was trying to look for opportunities to improve that developer experience. At a certain point, we started forming platform teams. And we kind of made the switch to having those platform teams take responsibility in the developer experience, which makes sense. However, that meant that the DevOps team itself was shifting more towards the socio-technical elements. And again there, the organization just wasn't ready for it. They couldn't yet grasp or understand why we wanted to focus on all those soft things. What do we need except for engineers and product managers, right? What could definitely go wrong? Another one which for us was a big part, as Roel mentioned, we grew quite quickly. And with that growth, we had focus on features, we had focus on business value, and that worked, but we all know how that goes after a certain time. So we ended up with a situation where we had a lot of technical debt. We had 4 Kafka platforms. I think we had 3 different CI/CD systems. We had so much legacy that we were just never saying goodbye to because, well, there really was no point or no actual value in doing so. Yet it was hindering that single team that we started with in that time. We had 6 people taking accountability for 50 infrastructure products. Well, those 6 people definitely didn't know all those 50 infrastructure products. I think still today we have a part on our roadmap called SpecOps, because there's just stuff that we don't know yet, which we still need to take care of. And if someone's going to take care of it, it's got to be us in the end. So also there, we needed to think about focusing on business value, but yet again, creating room for that single team to to do that, basically. We needed to have space. We needed to have less cognitive load, obviously. And with that, we also had obviously no uniform way of working. Throughout these years, people went, people came. People didn't really talk about standards that much, definitely wasn't across teams. So we also, again, there had to really bootstrap the social side again. So thinking about, okay, how do we actually want to do automation? What are our standards? Because if you're going to build multiple platforms, you definitely don't want the same user to have to deal with it in a different way. So there's a lot of value and a lot of effort going into that for sure, even today. And I think the last one is really about organizational change. So I've had a conversation already today and yesterday about this topic because this is one of the most interesting ones for me. It's easy to come into a company and see what could be changed, what could be improved, basically. It's harder for someone that has built that company from the ground up and has made it successful with all the things he's been doing for 10 years, or they've been doing for 10 years. So they saw the patterns and they used the patterns that they've been applying to grow from 10 people to 140 people nowadays. But they couldn't yet see what issues that were evolving and what other patterns or other techniques you could use to facilitate that or to apply to fix that. So a big one there is around architecture. When I came in, we always have architecture. That's a good quote that I learned from Kenny, who is here in the room too. There's always architecture, right? The decisions are made on a day-to-day basis. That's a fact. The question is, are they deliberate and are they communicated properly and thought out properly? And what we're trying to work towards is to have autonomy, also by teams, have architecture be part of a team, but yet make sure that there is alignment. Because if something is hurting, it's 20 or 35 teams that need to collaborate without alignment. So here we have started focusing in the beginning on more rudimentary things like architecture decision records, with the working group, so that we take people from the different teams to think about a specific topic, basically to get that collaboration going, get that community set up. But nowadays we're shifting more towards, and it's still a fairly small team today, but we're shifting more towards actually solving problems for the teams. And I think that's where we really hit off, because when we started, or when I started this, there was no architecture team. And it was basically a free-for-all, so inmates were running the asylum. So trying to convince, and especially for the Dutch people, we all know how stubborn Dutch people are and how much they love autonomy. If you come in and say, yeah, we're going to do architecture for you, yeah, that's not working well. So we really needed to find a way where teams saw value in what we were doing, and that we could actually get teams to come to us because of the fact that they saw that we were fixing their alignment issues. And that's 9 out of 10 times the thing we do. It is using technology, it is using team topologies, it's using modeling techniques, but in the end, it's about alignment, and it's about improving their pace, basically. The second one is about team composition and value streams. So as I mentioned, we started out with one team, which grew to 10, 12 people, I think, in 2022-ish, end of 2022. We knew that we had to do something there, because cognitive load was just too much. You can't focus on 50 things with 12 people. So the first thing we did was split that up, but it's the hardest choice ever if you never thought about hiring those 12 people for a specific purpose or goal, because you'll have personal preferences, you'll have desires from the company, things that we want to work towards. So in the end, it was quite an arbitrary choice on how to do that, which is still, again, being evolved. We founded 2 additional teams on top of that to basically create bubbles or isolation units that could focus on something completely different or new. And that really worked well. It's way harder to change a living system than it is to set something up in separation. So again, here it's about adjusting. And even today we are discussing, okay, how are we going to change the teams again? Because you see that some teams are still overburdened. Some teams, they don't have enough to do. And that sounds horrible because there's always stuff to do. But the question is that stuff the most valuable for us going into this year, basically? Because if you have isolated teams with autonomy, they will start working to a certain maturity level within their scope. But does that make sense for us right now? Are we ready for that? Is that also the biggest pain that our engineers have? So that's a question that we continuously discuss between products and people. And that does lead us to make continuous changes, basically. I think the last one, which is also a really interesting one, is about role definitions. So I mentioned that we came into a company where we just had product people and engineers, and that's all you need. It works great. And it does work great in the beginning. But at a certain point, there's just too much. Again, we had the idea that the product owner, as we call it, is the one that can take care of everything that a team needs to take care of. So if there's a people issue, sure, he can take care of it. If there's something that security wants, why not give it to the product owner? That again doesn't scale you. So you see that on one hand, the cognitive load is too high, and on the other hand, not every product owner that's hired, especially if you don't write down the fact that he's responsible for everything, will not do everything that's required to make a team successful. So I've been advocating quite a lot for establishing different roles that take responsibility of what comes to a team. And the responsibilities are around people, they're around product, and they're around technology. And yet again here, I never could convey the message to senior management why this was important. Because it's all overhead, right? It doesn't solve an issue. Yet again, the interesting thing is we never were held back to do this ourselves. And I think we've implemented this about a year ago. And you see now gradually that the organization is looking at us thinking, hey, that's interesting. It does actually reduce cognitive load. It does actually make sure that someone like Roel can focus on product instead of thinking about people or other issues. So it's, again, they're thinking about the shift that you can make yourself and show to the organization what the effect is. And if we're talking about showing to the organization what the effect is, I'm going to hand it over to Roel again. There you go.
Yes, so metrics. Metrics are of crucial importance, of course, if you're going through organizational changes. Quite a double slide. Okay. At the start of our platform journey, we started out with using DX as a way of getting continuous feedback from our development community. And basically, the way it works is we ask our development community questions every quarter, and these questions come from a big set of, or a big base of questions, and they all relate to different kind of drivers from which it's known from literature that they correlate well with developer happiness, productivity, return on investment, etc. Right? So, and drivers like deep work, drivers like batch size. Yeah, this is indeed too small. Drivers like incident response. And these are all compiled with, to a single score that's called the Developer Experience Index. And for us, we've bombarded that to our North Star metric. That's not the only thing we're measuring, but basically we're saying in the whole shift down story, like we're solving pain for our development community, making them more productive, etc. We say, if this number is improving, then we're doing the right thing. So, and of course we're interested in these outcomes, right? And there's the fun thing about DX is they have they do this with a lot of companies and a lot of different companies that leads to some validity in the numbers. So there are white papers and everything in how much of these kind of outcomes you can expect. And this works brilliantly when you want to convince higher management of why these things are important. In fact, we have an example of even today where we see a detailed report from our DX numbers is driving decision making. So that's perfect. Yeah. So and this DX or the DX index for us. We started out, since we started out, we increased 11 points of DXI. Well, that still doesn't say a lot, right? But what we learn from the base of DX data over all these hundreds of companies is that they report to us, we see an average increase of DXI of a point per year. So that has to mean that either we were really crappy, or we're doing really good, or a combination of those two. In any case, we're winning, right? I mean, we're moving into the right direction. We're doing something good, so that's terrific. But if you look into somewhat more detail, and this is of course tied to the growth paths and the findings that Mark has all been telling about, we kind of still see the same picture we've been seeing for years and years, right? That is, we see a big dichotomy between the developer community, which score pretty positive on this DXI, but the platform teams who are really lagging behind in their score. So this obviously tells us that DXI as North Star metric isn't the whole story, right? Because we say and we really mean we're not successful as a platform organization if the development community is happy, but the platform community is hurting. That's unacceptable, right? And this is the big next hurdle that we need to take as a DHL e-commerce, because we're very much delivering on the developer side, but we're very much under-delivering on the platform side. And if there are any ideas or suggestions or similar pains, come find us after the talk and talk to us, because we're really interested in how other people are dealing with this. Let's see. So this is my concluding slide. And basically, the entire story that we've been telling is, if you are going on a platform journey, start out with a vision, know what you would like to accomplish, right? Where you want to go, and choose a, or maybe some, North Star metrics to continuously measure how you're doing on the journey. But it's been stated before today already, it's very hard. So think in growth paths and think in journeys towards the goal. Right? It's not when we started out, we had a vision like this is what we're going to fix in the coming 3 years. And now we're thinking this is what we're going to fix in the coming 3 years. And probably in 3 years, we're thinking this is what we're going to fix in the coming 3 years. And do measure continuously. And you're going to find wins and celebrate those wins, because it's a long and hard journey, but it's, as we show from our DXI metrics, it's a long and hard journey, but it's worth it, and it brings you a lot. Which concludes our talk.
Wow, thank you.